Hey,
Okay, I can't do it. I don't know how. There's
um,
there's nothing enabling me to do that. So add you as a panelist. So,
okay. Is everyone else? I can't even see like a waiting room or participants at all.
okay, well, I'm looking at the participants that are coming on right now, and I will let them in.
Okay.
Okay, so, okay. So I think we'll get started here. I will turn my camera on briefly and say hello to everyone who's here so far. Hello, everyone. My name is Kim Angel. I'm the Executive Director of the Canadian MPS Society, and thank you all for taking the time to be here today in this incredible webinar that we're going to present with some wonderful and brilliant and resilient panel guests and speakers today. I am going to turn this over to Alexandra Wyatt, who will facilitate and moderate this webinar. Once again, thank you. And I also would like to thank our sponsors of the Education and Connection series, the Federal Government of Canada, Takeda, Sanofi Genzyme, and BioMarin. And a big thank you to our panelists for being here today. And off to you, Alex.
Hi, everyone. We couldn't figure out how to get my camera on, so you're just gonna have to stare at my name. But thank you for passing it over, Kim. So I'll reintroduce myself for anyone who doesn't know me. I'm Alex, and I was hired to the Canadian MPS Society as a Special Projects and Initiatives Coordinator in early 2021. I wanted to thank you all for joining me today us in the webinar, and we're so excited to have everyone together for this webinar series. So the topic of today's webinar is resilience in rare disease, where our speakers will be talking about their unique story with their rare disease diagnosis. The Canadian MPS Society acknowledges the hardships our members and members' families have faced with their rare disease diagnosis and how such adversities are only exacerbated by the coronavirus pandemic. We are hoping that the stories of our speakers today empower you and your family during these hard and trying times. So without further ado, I'd like to address our speakers for the session. So thank you, Carolyn Marie Fidalgo, Rob Long, and Mark Dant for joining us today. We're so excited to hear about your stories. So each speaker will present for roughly 20 minutes, and we can do a question and answer period at the end. So the order that we'll go in is first we'll do Carolyn Marie, then we'll do Rob, and then we'll finish with Mark. So I'll do a small speaker introduction before every speaker goes. So first, let's start off with Carolyn Marie Fidalgo. She's the mother of Alex Olivier, a 6-year-old boy diagnosed with MPS 1H. Carolyn has been an administrative assistant since her teen years and now works as a virtual assistant and a stay-at-home mom. Carolyn is also her son's primary caregiver, as the MPS diagnosis requires many hospital stays and hundreds of medical appointments. Thank you so much for coming to speak today, Carolyn. We'd like to welcome you to unmute yourself and begin telling your story.
Thank you, Alex. So as Alex mentioned, my name is Caroline Marie Fidalgo, and I will talk to you about my journey with my son's rare genetic disease. And I want to say it's my first presentation ever, so I'm quite nervous, so please be patient with me. I'll just start by sharing my PowerPoint that I did for Alex, I cannot share my screen. Is it possible to give me access to screen sharing?
I think Kim, can you jump in?
Yes, I will. Just one moment, please.
Thank you.
Okay, that should be enabled for you now, Carolyn.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay. So a little bit about me. As Alex mentioned, I have a son whose name is Alex Olivier, and I used to work as an administrative assistant ever since my teen years. But last year I had to quit my job of the past 14 years to take care of Alex Olivier full time, because as Alex mentioned, all the appointments that he has, and also because of the pandemic, and due to the pandemic, he has virtual school, so he doesn't go to school for now. So I also have to make school for him from home. But I still manage somehow to work part-time whenever I have a little free time as a virtual assistant. And with Alex Olivier, it's my second time as a caregiver. I have been a caregiver for an ex-boyfriend during 9 years. And now with Alex Olivier, I've been a caregiver for since 2016, since his diagnosis. So here's my little boy, Alex Olivier. I call that the many faces of Alex Olivier. As you can see, he has been through a lot of physical changes through the years. So on the first picture at the top left, it was around 9 months before his diagnosis. And then the second picture was taken 3 days after his first bone marrow transplant. And then the third picture was taken about 2 or 3 weeks before his GVHD started. Quickly explained, GVHD is when the graft attacks the recipient's body because it doesn't recognize it as its own. So in Alex Olivier's case, the transplant that worked was with my own stem cells. So my stem cells didn't recognize Alex Olivier's body as being theirs, so they attacked it. And the way that they attacked his body is they attacked the liver and they attacked his skin. So bottom 3 picture different, his hair also. This is caused by GVHD. He has many scars burned from the inside, if I can explain it that way. And then top right, we have Alex Olivier during one of his ICU trips in 2016. And then the bottom, we have Alex Olivier in one of his many blood infections in 2017. So as you can see, Alex Olivier has been through a lot, but unfortunately, that's not the only things he's been through. So just quickly said, in case there are some people that don't know much about Hurler and MPS. So MPS is a rare orphan and degenerative disease. And in Hurler's case, both parents have to be a carrier for the child to be affected. And in our case, neither I or my boyfriend knew that we had, that we were carriers of the defective gene. Hurler syndrome affects the entire body, all the organs, all the body systems, including the brain. A bone marrow transplant may slow down or reverse some problem, but not all of them. And Alex Olivier had 3 bone marrow transplants. And here I put the picture at the bottom to really illustrate what the GVHD has done to his skin. As you can see, when he was younger, he had really even skin, normal skin. And at the bottom, on his forehead, it's his normal skin, which is the skin that is a little darker. It's his real skin. And everything that is whiter is what has been burned by the GVHD. And as you can see, he used to have a lot of hair, but now he doesn't have much hair. That was because of the GVHD. So Alex Olivier's journey, he was diagnosed at 21 months old, which is quite late for Hurler for a transplant. So it was a race against the clock to have a bone marrow transplant because before he would turn 2 years old. So the main moments that he had, well, he was born in 2016, and the first suspicions of Hurler or Hunter were in June 2016, and it was confirmed that it was Hurler MPS 1H in July. As soon as the diagnosis was official, he started enzyme replacement therapy. And then he went through tons of baseline tests in July and August because doctors wanted to be able to do a comparison between before the transplant and after to see what had gone better with the transplant or what had gone worse with the transplant. So it was admitted at the hospital for a transplant in August. His first bone marrow transplant was at the end of August, was from cord blood from the blood bank. And then his second bone marrow transplant was again cord blood at the beginning of October. His third stem cell, the one that worked, was with my stem cells in November. but things happened, and he was in the ICU about a week or two later, and he nearly died. Nobody knew if he would be able to go through, because his body was really failing. But he got through it, and we got home in April 2017, and then in September 2017, that's where his GVHD started, and he began photopheresis treatments in November 2018. And photopheresis treatment is to help with the GVHD. I will not read all the slide, but as you can see, there are many things that have happened with Alex Olivier, and I'm sure I have forgotten a few because there are so many things. But quickly said, he has had since 2017 over between 100 and 200 medical appointments per year. He's had many blood transfusions, many photopheresis treatments. He's had chemotherapy before each transplant. He's had radiotherapy before the second or third transplant, etc., etc., etc. And he has been seen / is still seen by over 20 specialists for many different reasons. And he's currently being under investigation for autism, ADHD, and intellectual disability, because even though he's almost 7, his behavior and the way he reacts, it's not as a 7-year-old, it's way younger than that. So again, I will not read the whole slide, but of course, this has been a crazy ride, and it has impacted the family a lot. As we mentioned, technically I don't have a job. I work whenever I have the time, and even his dad, my boyfriend, still works 5 years later part-time because there's so many appointments, and we always go both of us together because it's always so complicated with Alex Olivier that we want to be there both to make sure that we clearly understand what's going on. So emotionally, it has been really tough, financially also. And I want to take this opportunity to thank the Canadian MPS Society for all their financial help that they've given us in the past years. And the current situation with the pandemic is also difficult because Alex Olivier is highly disabled and very dependent of us, especially me. And we don't get a lot of support because he's vulnerable to the COVID-19. So it's been a wild ride, and we try to make the best of it, but it's not always easy. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm 24/7 with Alex Olivier because he cannot attend school. So I work whenever I can and whenever he will let me work. Now about resilience and the stage of grief. About 3 years ago, I was part of a group with other mothers with kids with rare diseases. And we were shown the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, depression, bargaining, and acceptance in a linear way. And before I continue, I just want to say that personally, I don't like the term acceptance because I don't think I'll ever accept the fact that Alex Olivier has a deadly disease. So I prefer saying that I've learned to live with it, or that I've learned to deal with it, even though it's the same thing. But for me, I don't like acceptance. So this being said, we've been shown, as I said, the stages of grief in a linear way. But for me, this image is exactly how grief works. It's not linear. You can skip a step, you can go back a step depending on what happens. So this is clearly how it works. And I think that when people know that it's normal to go back and forth between steps, it helps because, for example, whenever I have a situation where I have some bad news about Alex Olivier's health, even though I can deal with the situation and I've learned to live with it, I can go back to anger. And for some people, going back is like a relapse or a failure, but knowing that it is normal to go back for a moment or a week or whatever, it helps with the grieving. So in my case, what I found that helped me with grieving and to get to be resilient, first is time. It's cliche, but it's true that time does heal. About 3 years ago, when I was in that meeting that I talked about, I was in the depression stage, which is this third stage of grief. And I really couldn't believe that one day I could learn to live with Alex Olivier's disease. So technically, I can say that it has been only a few months that really I've accepted to live with it. So it took me 4 years to get there, which is a long time, but at the same time, it's not a one size fits all. I know that for my boyfriend, it took him a few months, but I remember that those months for him were really, really tough and hard emotionally. But me, it took years, and that's okay. So what I want to say with that is, whenever you face a situation that is really hard, don't be hard on yourself. Don't tell yourself, well, these people have lived the same situation and are okay. A month or two later, a year later, I'm still refocused into that. It's okay. And everybody grieves depending on how they have lived things in the past. So if it's one thing I can say is just take your time and eventually you will get there. As I said, it took me 4 years and I really thought that I just couldn't get there someday. So, and the other thing that has helped me is facing the situation. And even though the pandemic has caused me, not caused me, but made the fact that Alex Olivier is now here 24/7. So yes, it's a lot of work and a lot of sleepless nights and everything. But at the same time, it has helped me to get to the point of resilience. Why? Because I'm always with him. And there was a time, and there are still some times now, that whenever I would just look at him, I would be really heartbreaking, angry, because of his GVHD and his NG2 that he has to be fed. It's a constant reminder of his disease. So it was really hard for me. But now that he's here 24/7, he's not going to school or anything, I cannot just leave him alone in front of his iPad on YouTube all day, even though I know that he would love that, but I just cannot. So, and also the thing is that Alex Olivier is really connected to my emotions. Whenever I don't feel good and when I was in that depression stage of grief, he was always reacting negatively. He was always, as we say, pushing my buttons, always nagging me, making fun of me, laughing at me when I would be crying. So, I kind of had to eventually, okay, he's sick. It breaks my heart, but there's a way to live with it and to be happy with him. And I also noticed that eventually, the more I started talking to myself and telling myself that things would be okay, even though it's something major, and I don't wish that kind of situation to anyone. So yeah, the more I talked to myself, and the more he started having a better attitude. So that kind of helped me to keep on going on with that change of mind. And it's still hard. It's still something that is really hard to live with sometimes. But at the same time, now I can say that it's really fun with my son. He's way happier now that I've gone through all those stages, that I can really live with the situation. And I really think that before I was doing everything I could to not face the situation, because I just couldn't deal with it. But now I can. And as I said, it took 4 years and it took a pandemic to help me. So I can say that even though it's really hard living 24/7 with him, with the pandemic and not having any respite or anything, it has helped me to live well with the situation. So that pretty sums up what I wanted to say today. So I hope that if you're living in a situation where it's really hard and you don't see the end, and you think you'll never be able to deal with it or live with it, you will eventually, when no one knows, but you will. And having a child with a rare disease is really hard, really tough on a daily basis, because you never know what will happen. Like Alex Olivier, we don't know when he's going to die. And it's always something that bothers us. Whenever there's something, we're always afraid that he loses some abilities as the disease is degenerative, but we still make the most of it. Of the time we have. As you can see, he can be a really sweet and nice child. And yeah, take your time to accept the situation and just face the situation. Don't run away from it. The more you run away from it, it's going to be harder. And I think that if you run away from it the day that a child dies, it's going to be harder, because you will have missed a lot of good times. Because now I can say that I have a good time with Alex Olivier, even though, yes, I still see his face and his GVHD. Now I can go beyond that, which I couldn't before. So thanks for your time.
Wow, thank you so much, Carolyn Marie. That was such an excellent presentation.
Thank you.
And Alex Olivier is adorable. But I really liked how you talked about the pandemic and the silver linings of the pandemic with your son, and how it's connected you guys more. So thank you again for coming in to speak. That was such an inspirational story. Okay, so now we will move to Rob. I'll just ask Carolyn Marie that you stop sharing your screen, and then we can move it on to Rob. So just to give you guys a brief background, Rob is from Philadelphia. He is a former All-American punter at Syracuse and has lived with a rare disease journey. So in December of 2010, late in his senior season, Rob was diagnosed with an anaplastic astrocytoma, a rare and aggressive form of brain cancer. His prognosis at the time was less than encouraging, and his surgery recovery treatment took 16 months, sorry. Prior to his diagnosis, Rob was on a path to become an NFL punter, but that opportunity was lost by the time he was healthy enough to train again. After graduating from a master's in the new media management program, Rob now works as the director of rare disease engagement at Uplifting Athletes. So Rob, we welcome you to the stand.
All right, thank you so much, Alex. Thank you for the intro. I'm so glad to be here. Caroline, your presentation was amazing. It was an incredible first presentation. If that was your first one, you did an excellent job. So thank you so much, Alex, and Canadian NPS Society for having me be here. And I'm excited to kind of share my story and my story of resilience and what I've been through. So my story, as Alex had mentioned, starts back at Syracuse. I had this unbelievable opportunity to pursue a dream of mine to become a professional athlete. And so I had this opportunity where I was given a full scholarship to play football at Syracuse University. It was something that I absolutely enjoyed. I loved it. It was an unbelievable opportunity for me. As Alex had mentioned, I was on this path to play in the NFL. And 5 days after my last regular season game, I was diagnosed with a rare and aggressive form of brain cancer. At the time of my diagnosis, the 5-year survival rate of my cancer was 15%. And the doctors at that time told my parents they would not expect me to live more than 36 months. As you can see on the screen, this is the MRI that I saw on December 3rd, 2010. I had walked in, I had never seen an MRI of a brain before in my entire life. I walked in and just basically was like, well, what am I looking at? And they told me that that large mass is not supposed to be there. And that was the first time that I really, understood, what I was dealing with and what I was in for. From there, it was just all about how do I move forward and like, what can I do to give myself a chance? And for me, I just wanted to find a way forward. My family has been deeply impacted by rare cancers and cancer in general. And this was something that my mom was one of 7, and she had lost her father when she was just 7 years old. He was 36. He passed from brain cancer. She lost her mom and when her mother was only 52 to breast cancer, and her oldest brother was 52 and or sorry 42 when he passed away from testicular cancer. Her oldest sister passed away from breast cancer at 56. And her youngest sister and I were actually diagnosed the same day. So the December 2nd, 2010, I called my parents and told them that the doctors had found a growth in my brain. And I vividly remember the phone call that day. My dad said, "I can't believe this." He said, your Aunt Christy was just diagnosed with breast cancer earlier today. Unfortunately, after going through her treatment, and being in remission, my Aunt Christy was diagnosed with a primary brain tumor in 2015 and passed away in less than 12 months. And for me, that played a kind of huge role in my journey of where I am today and how I've kind of traveled through my life and now my career. For me, I was diagnosed back in December 2010, like I said, and all I wanted to do was just find a way forward, find that path forward. And for me, I had received good news in 2011. I had received my first clean MRI. And for me, I was really encouraged. I was, it was a point where most brain cancer patients do not get to. And for me, that was something that I was encouraged by, I was excited by, and I felt hopeful that, we were making progress. And then when my Aunt Christy was diagnosed in 2015 and just had a really tough battle, it was a harsh reality for me to understand that I have been extremely lucky and that we have a long way to go, not only with brain cancer, but so many of these rare diseases, that there's so much more that we need to do as a community to move this progress forward. And so that's where, for me, I've been just so inspired by the people in the rare disease community. And for me, I went through and I had this naive stubbornness that I was going to play in the NFL after my brain cancer diagnosis. I wanted to solve all the world's problems by punting a football. And the reality of the situation is that wasn't going to happen, right? That I needed to kind of release myself from that burden of what my family had been through, what I had been through, and focus on becoming the best version of myself. And that's what, as Caroline so eloquently mentioned, is you get to that point where that you go through these cycles of grief. And I completely agree with your acceptance analogy, right? It's not truly an acceptance. It's just kind of acknowledging that it happened, but trying to find a way forward. And so for me, football for a while was kind of that goal that I had. It pushed me through from one day to the next. It was something that gave me hope, and it taught me a lot. When I was playing at Syracuse, you go through a very regimented schedule where you're up working out at 6 a.m. every morning, you're going through class, then you're going back to the football facility, back to work, back to practice, back to, all this other stuff that you have commitment wise. And for me, it just taught me and ingrained in me this work ethic. And that's what I applied. I was going through treatment. I would wake up in the mornings, and I would either take the train into the city or drive in, and I would take my chemotherapy, then my radiation therapy, and I did that every day for a month and a half. Took some time off, and then I had 12 months of chemotherapy that followed after that, and it was a very long journey. And even through going through that chemotherapy for so long, the treatment was essentially 27-day cycles where I would have 5 days of treatment and then have 3 weeks off. And for me, it was, I think the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. And for 12 months of my life, I was going through this cycle of trying to spend 3 weeks to gain as much weight as I could, to work out, to train, knowing that in a 1 week span of my chemotherapy, I would lose all that progress. And it would just go through and again and again and again. And for everything that I've been through, and now that I'm sitting here in front of you, the hardest part for me has really been the mental and emotional battles that I've had to fight. And it hasn't really been, until fairly recently, within the last couple of years, that I've been able to really understand, where I've been and what I've been through, and come to terms with that, and then be able to position kind of my story and my journey in a way that I can help others and give back. So that was why I was so fortunate in 2012. I had reached out to the founder of Uplifting Athletes, a gentleman named Scott Shirley. And I'm sorry, I'll back up a second. In 2012, one of my teammates at Syracuse had reached out to me and said, I would like to start the Syracuse chapter of Uplifting Athletes in your honor. Really, are you okay with that? And to this day, it is one of the coolest honors that I've ever had, to be a part of the development of the Syracuse chapter of Uplifting Athletes. It gave me a meaning and a purpose, for an outlet for me to tell my story, to share with my teammates, and to see that chapter, live on 9 years later, and continuing to flourish and to support the rare disease community is remarkable in and of itself. And after a couple years of just working with the Syracuse chapter, telling my story, going up and talking to the team, helping raise funds, I reached out to Scott Shirley in 2016 and asked him if there was an opportunity for me to join the team full time. And fortunately for me, there was. And so I joined Uplifting Athletes in 2016 as a director of rare disease engagement. And really, I sat down with Scott and I said, I want to be able to help people who have been through what I've been through. And what we did was just focus on how we could utilize the platform at Uplifting Athletes to support the rare disease community. And we developed a program called the Young Investigator Draft, something that for me was a unique opportunity, because it was a new way that we wanted to focus and support rare disease research. And you see here, our mission at Uplifting Athletes is to inspire the rare disease community with hope through the power of sport. And really how we do that is by working with athletes at all levels, high school, college, and professional, to help them realize the platform that they have, and then leverage that platform to support the rare disease community. So when we talk about this development of the Young Investigator Draft, we took this concept of saying the NFL draft selects the top athletes in the country. And for us, we wanted to kind of take that model and steal it. And instead of drafting the top athletes in the country, we're going to draft the top rare disease researchers in the country. And this was a program that we would talk to industry partners and to the general population. And sometimes people would look at us like we had 9 different heads and said, well, I don't really understand what you're doing. But we persisted, and we had some organizations and some companies that believed in us, believed in this concept. And I'm proud to share that we held our 4th Young Investigator Draft on March 30th of 2021. It was our first virtual iteration of the Young Investigator Draft. But in the 4 years of the Young Investigator Draft, we've been able to fund 24 researchers and over $440,000 in rare disease research grants. And really the ideas behind this Young Investigator Draft is to plant seeds in the rare disease community, to celebrate and elevate the researchers that are doing this pivotal, important research at the very beginning of the therapy development cycle, so that we can start to work towards treatments and therapies for all those in the rare disease community. For me, this is something that's not only what I do for work, it's also deeply personal for me, because I realize that as I sat in that exam room a little over 10 years ago, all I wanted, all I hoped for was just a chance, just an opportunity, something to give me hope to move forward. And I was one of the lucky people that did have that chance. I had that opportunity. There was, a therapy that they could try. It was tough to hear that there's no cure for what you have when you're 22 years old. But they said, there's something we can try. And, initially, the hope was that it would extend my life by about 6 months. But, I sit here now in front of you all over 10 years later, and it is because of that opportunity, that hope that I had, that I'm able to work and do what I do now, and to try and pay it forward. What we want to be able to do is provide those opportunities, that hope for many families in the rare disease community. And the best way that we feel that we can do this right now is through the Young Investigator Draft. So it's a program that we're continuing to develop and to grow. And, in the future, we're going to continue to kind of assess how we can impact the future of the rare disease research community. One of the things that we've developed through the Young Investigator Draft, I have a video, but I'm going to save it because just for time constraints. One of the things that, through the development of the Young Investigator Draft, one of the things that I've learned and I truly believe in is collaboration. There's so many different challenges that we face in the rare disease community, and there's just no way that any one nonprofit organization, patient advocacy organization, industry partner, anybody's going to be able to solve those issues by themselves. And so we wanted to drive and celebrate collaboration. And through the Young Investigator Draft, one of the things that we have this lofty goal of helping people reimagine the way we fund and support rare disease research. And so when we put out our request for applications for the Young Investigator Draft, it's not a traditional application that is just filled out by a researcher and submitted and reviewed. What we ask is that researchers actually partner with patient advocacy organizations or vice versa, and to build that relationship, and they apply together. The reason that we do this is that we believe that it's really important that researchers understand the needs of the patients in those patient advocacy communities, and that those researchers are focusing on the top priorities and the top needs for that patient community. On the other side, we found that researchers are spending anywhere from 40 to 60% of their time, and that's probably a conservative estimate, just to secure funding to pursue their research. And so for this, for me, as somebody that's been through this, as on that patient side, like, that's unacceptable. Like, we can do better. We use the analogy is that what if we had our NFL athletes, fundraising Monday through Thursday so that they could have the equipment and supplies that they need to play a game and practice, on Sunday. And so there's things that I think we can do to better assist and better support the rare disease researchers that are doing the vital work that we need. So by developing this relationship, our hope is that the patient advocacy organizations can build these relationships with researchers, become the spokesperson, become the fundraising arm for these researchers to help bridge that gap, to hopefully curb the amount of time that they're spending on just securing funding, and can focus more of their time on research. At the end of the day, what we hope to do is create positive change through uplifting athletes. We want to do that through rare disease research, but we know that we have a unique platform and a unique opportunity to get this message out, to get the rare disease message out beyond just the rare disease community. We're so fortunate that we have a number of people that follow and support uplifting athletes solely based on the fact that we work with a school or chapter that their son or nephew plays at, or an athlete in the NFL or Major League Baseball that they follow and support. And so for us, we don't take it lightly that I think we have a unique opportunity to really share the words and the needs of the rare disease community to the general population through the platform of sports and athletics. And so for us, we want to make sure that we're doing all that we can to properly articulate, the needs and the wants and the desires of the rare disease community through that platform. So for us, this is an ongoing thing. We're constantly reassessing, constantly evaluating, and wanting to do the best that we can for the rare disease community in a number of different ways. Like I said, this is something that it's more than a job. It's more than something that I just do every day. This is something that I'm passionate about. I love. I feel like If you've ever heard me talk before, I honestly feel like I am one of the luckiest people on the face of this earth. Not only for, being here today and being able to do what I do, but for so many different reasons. I think that, we all have this, unbelievable ability to change the world. And I think just working together, we can do that. And so I love that I have that ability and that opportunity through working with uplifting athletes now. It's something that I love and deeply passionate about. So that's all I have, but thank you all so much for the time. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak. So thank you so much for allowing me to share my story.
Thank you so much, Rob. Wow, that was awesome again. Another very inspiring story, and you hit the nail on the head with a lot of the points that you brought up. For me, my experience in working in a patient organization, I see firsthand the disconnect that happens with the researchers and the patient organizations and the patients themselves. So yeah, it's a great mission that uplifting athletes is trying to follow now. So without further ado, we'll introduce our last speaker, which is Mark Dant. So Mark serves as the board chair of the Everyday Life Foundation for Rare Disease, which is a science-based advocacy organization dedicated to accelerating biotech innovations for rare disease treatments through science-driven policy. Mark is also the founder and the executive director of the Ryan Foundation. So the Ryan Foundation was founded by Mark and his wife, Jen, with a bake sale after their only child's 3-year-old boy, Ryan, was diagnosed with MPS I. The Ryan Foundation partnered with Dr. Emil Kakis and provided key funding, which culminated in the development of the Aldurazyme. I can't pronounce that. And it's the first and only drug approved for the treatment of MPS I. So without further ado, thank you, Mark, for coming.
I'm going to try sharing my screen, but before I do that, I want to thank Rob and Caroline both, because as I listen to you both, it's quite remarkable how both stories really fit together very well to the listener as to many different aspects. The cycle of grief, we've heard that before, but I've never heard it in the way you put it, Caroline. And none of us have been able to accept that word acceptance. But I think, Rob, you may have nailed it when you said find a way forward. So at that specific point, I guess that's when each of us still remember the life that we thought we were going to have, but we find a way forward, as you have, Caroline, with your beautiful son who has the best smile I've seen in a long, long time. So thank you for sharing those pictures. And Rob, I've heard your story before as well, and it is truly remarkable. You're pushing forward and changing many lives with the science. Science, as we know, is the key to every change. Let me see if I can learn how to share my screen.
There you go, Mark.
Oh, there we go. So this is my favorite picture of the last 5 years. I'll only host like that.
It's one of my favorite pictures too.
You may have taken that picture, actually.
I could have.
There we go. Oops. Well, close enough. The previous picture, if I can figure out how to go back, was taken in 2017 when Kim invited me up to meet many of the families of the Canadian MPS Society. And I have to tell you, that was one of the best weekends I've had in a long time. Seeing those who are on the same journey as our family and learning so many stories of what can happen when we work together as a team, family to family, person to person, country to country, to try to make a change. Looking back in the past 4 years, what has happened in science is truly remarkable, because families like all of us standing up through the leadership of the Canadian MPS Society and the US Society and other nonprofits, we really are making a huge difference in science. The first picture is kind of shocking, because you can tell I'm starting my stopwatch so I can not go too long. The only reason I show this picture is to show that our family is no different than any other family, in that my wife and I decided to get married. We actually knew each other in high school. I spent some time in the military, and then after college, got married and moved to Dallas, and we're going to live happily ever after. And when I say that, I want you to think of all of us have had the same exact start, it seems like. When we decided we were going to have a child, we all envision what that child will be like. And I see that as now, as I look backwards, as the visual and the dreams of the home that might have been. And Caroline, you mentioned that sometimes we circle back in the grief cycle. And I find myself still, after all these years, angry, and then have to work my way through to find my way forward, as Rob says. But I think what gets me angry at times is the comparison of other lives and not focusing in on our own, the happiness in our own life and the changes that our own child has gone through and helped us go through is really remarkable. So Gina and I got married in Louisville, Kentucky. She was in college. I just started a career in Dallas. We moved to Dallas and decided how many kids we would have. We had a whole thing lined out. I wanted a large family of 5 and Jean wanted 3. We decided we would have 3 and buy a house. We'd get a dog. We do all the things that in that wish world would be perfect, because it was perfect. A young couple just married. She finished college, got a job with American Airlines. And 3 years later, we had our firstborn, Ryan Christopher Dan, April 13th, 1988. Happy, smiling, healthy, beautiful. Remember, we had it all planned out. We'd get our jobs, we'd get promoted, we'd buy a house, we'd get a dog, we'd start having kids, then we get a bigger house, and life was going to be perfect. When Ryan was 3.5, we decided we should probably put him into maybe a structured preschool so he could learn how to be with other kids and maybe learn the importance of how to be a big brother. So we did. Jean brought him to Dr. William Coco in Dallas, his pediatrician, just for the mandatory pre-daycare physical. But Dr. Coco said, that there's something not quite right. Now, I didn't go to the doctor at that time because there was nothing wrong with Ryan. Dr. Coco thought there was. Liver was and spleen were too large. His head was too large. His hands were a little stiff. These are all things we probably noticed but never really looked at, because remember, in our minds, like all of us, our child is perfect. That life that we see other people have and feel so bad for them, well, that's not our life, because it wasn't in the dreams that we had actually toasted to the night of that wedding picture. The hopes and dreams. Remember raising your glass and someone making a toast, probably a bad toast, about all your hopes and dreams because they're going to come true. Dr. Coco was so worried about Ryan that before Jean left the appointment, he turned around and made an appointment at Dallas Children's Hospital with a geneticist. Now, we know in Canada and the US, it takes sometimes 3 to 5 months or even longer to get in to see a geneticist. But Dr. Coco pulled some strings, and in 2 weeks, I look back and see how remarkable that truly was. Ryan had an appointment with Dr. Lou Weber, a geneticist at Dallas Children's. I didn't go because remember, there's nothing wrong with Ryan. I mean, you look at him and you can justify anything you see because there's nothing wrong with Ryan. He's just going to a physical because it's time for him to be a big brother. Well, Dr. Weber took some tests and told Jean, I think Ryan may have this really rare condition, but I don't want you to worry about it yet because, we're not sure. So we took some tests and said, we'll call you when they come back. So in 3 weeks, Dr. Weber called us at home, his office did, and said, come on in, we're going to go through the tests. This time I went because Jean had been nervous now for over a month because she had thought there was something wrong with Ryan. And I reassured her, there really is nothing wrong with Ryan. Look at him. He loves baseball. He loves sports. He's left-handed. As Rob knows, I always thought that gave everyone a big advantage in sports. He's going to be a sports guy maybe, or his life's planned out. It's going to be good. So I went to explain to Dr. Weber when he told us there was nothing wrong with Ryan that, well, we appreciate your time, but I told you there was nothing wrong with Ryan. Now I want you to flash forward to your diagnosis day, and whether or not you were nervous, because I know that you were. Many of us in the MPS world, in the rare disease world, go months, years without an accurate diagnosis. So I look now and see how lucky we actually were to find a diagnosis. So it was as the door opened and in walked this Dr. Weber. He walked in with a family counselor and a genetic counselor and another physician. And then he spoke. So I'm going to try to play a video here. I'm not sure it will work on Zoom, but hopefully it will.
Mark, do you want to raise the sound a bit?
Mark, I'm sorry. We need you to maybe increase the volume. We can't hear it on
Not
our.
good.
Yeah.
Can you hear it at all?
No.
Oh, well, let's try it one more time and let me know if you can't hear volume. We'll just have to wing it.
Okay. No.
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 Well, I'm sorry. I thought that would, but I guess it's not. So
But Mark, I'll just interrupt. Maybe I've seen that that clip. Maybe if you could send me a link to that, and then I'll share it with our
Sure.
webinar. Okay. Thank you.
okay. So I apologize for my lack of electronic acuity. So you can actually find the 60-minute segment online. And I'll send you a link. So Dr. Weber basically told us that there was no hope for Ryan. If you flash backwards a long time ago, Ryan was diagnosed in 1991. He was 3.5 years old. And at that time, before genetic sequencing, geneticists who diagnosed MPS and many other disorders only diagnosed by what they saw with time. We were told that Ryan may have Hurler, may have the attenuated Hurler-Shea, but he definitely does have MPS 1. We were told the only treatment at the time was a bone marrow transplant that was new, and actually the mortality rate was a little over 50%. So the suggestion was to not transplant Ryan because he was at 3.5. I remember asking Dr. Weber, actually pushed pretty hard about it. There have to be companies that are involved in rare disease or in this disease research. Where are the companies? And Dr. Weber said there really aren't any, because it's the first time I heard the term rare disease or orphan disease. He said there are so many diseases like this where there are so few children, there isn't a business model built where a drug company can step in and make a profit, so they don't step in. So what about researchers? There are probably researchers. And he said, well, actually, because it's such a rare disorder, most of the research goes to other disorders. So the sad reality of it is there really is no hope. He may have not said those words, but those were the words that Gene and I heard. There was no hope. He said Ryan's lifespan would be 10 or 12 years if he had MPS severe, Hurler. If he had attenuated, he could make it to the late teens. Before he passed away, he'd be in a lot of pain. He may be blind or deaf, mentally challenged. He wouldn't be throwing a baseball anymore because his hands would stiffen up. He probably wouldn't walk towards the end. He'd be in a wheelchair and he would pass away. Every moment of that diagnosis day was severe. As you look at your own, I know you know the feeling. All of us know the feeling. The loss of hope, the loss of tomorrow. So we left and we did what Caroline and Rob explained perfectly, is we went home and grieved for a year. We did nothing. I got angry and then I grieved, and Jean was very quiet. That's her personality. And we didn't speak to each other. Every night we'd lay on the floor next to his bed and we would wait. And we waited. Looking back, I realized we were waiting for nothing to change. Nothing did change. I spent a lot of time in the public library because, believe it or not, this was the time before the internet. So I wanted to learn more about what was coming with Ryan. Everything Dr. Weber told us was accurate. Everything I read said the exact same thing. I found no research or no science. I looked, but I didn't really find any. So time went on. But after about a year, and actually going to the National MPS Society in the US, had a meeting in Denver, and I met children and parents with MPS 1 who were 3 like Ryan, and 5 and 7 and 10 and 12. We didn't see any after that. There was no treatment. There was no hope. There was no tomorrow. Ryan would come and go. We wouldn't have any other children because, as Caroline said, it's a 1 in 4 chance of any children in the future would have Ryan's condition and would pass away by the time they were 15 or so. So after laying on the floor for a year and nothing changing, and I actually stumbled across a book on how to start a nonprofit. So we got this idea that we would start a nonprofit, and we did, but we didn't have a really good idea how to start it. We started with a bake sale. How goofy is that? My friends got together and raised $342 in a bake sale. But it was a good day. But for some reason, getting up off the floor and trying to do something, anything to change tomorrow actually felt good. We didn't have a scientist, but we did have hope because we found there was effort and hope, that we were able to move beyond, for me personally, the stage of anger and try to get a little bit further down the line. And so we had a lot of fundraisers. We had golf tournaments and auctions and a boxing tournament and bike races, anything you could think of, we had it. And Ryan was the poster child. Things worked well in that we were doing better at raising money, but we didn't find any science. And so I heard of an international symposium in Dusseldorf, Germany that year on lysosomal storage disorders. So my reading in the library taught me that an LSD was like Ryan and LSD, a problem with the lysosome. So I thought maybe I could meet scientists there or someone who could give an answer other than the answer is no, you have no hope. So Gene, working with American Airlines, we got to fly for free, which is a big benefit, and flew to Dusseldorf and sat through a 3-day symposium about LSDs. There was a researcher who presented named Roscoe Brady, presented on a disease called Gaucher. And I knew in my reading that Gaucher was very similar to MPS I, and that the cell was storing something that it shouldn't. And he showed pictures of this little girl who looked horribly. Her stomach was distended. It was, and she was coming to the end of her life. It was obvious. But then at the end of his presentation, this 12-year-old girl walked on the stage and she was beautiful. She wasn't limping. Her stomach was flat. She was smiling. And it was the same 12-year-old girl. Dr. Brady had developed a treatment for Gaucher called enzyme replacement therapy. And it worked. So after he presented, I followed him down the hallway and stopped him and actually had a video, one of those great big video cameras that your parents probably would sit on their shoulders. That was me. I'm that dad who videotaped everything Ryan did. And I asked Dr. Brady, who knew not me at all, if he would watch this video. And I set the camera up on his shoulder and he looked through the eyepiece and he watched Ryan playing Little League, T-ball. He hit a double and he ran a second. He was happy and running. And Dr. Brady said, well, he's very cute. How old is he? I said, well, he's 4, but he has MPS I. So I have to ask you, is it possible to do what you did for Gaucher for MPS I? In a nice long conversation. At the end, in a nutshell, he said a couple things, but he did say one thing that stuck with me. He said, he asked me again, how old is Ryan? And I said, well, he's 4. He said, well, it's possible, but you don't have a couple things that you're going to need. In a roundabout way, he said, you don't have enough time because Ryan's 4. You don't have enough money because it's going to take a lot of money. But he did say it was possible, which gave us hope because there was hope and effort. And we thought, well, we can raise money, we can find a scientist, and it's possible. So that year, we partnered with the National MPS Society in the US and had a conference in Orlando and brought all the children from across the US with all the MPS disorders to Disney World. We also brought scientists, Dr. Elizabeth Neufeld and Dr. Joe Munzer from UCLA and UNC. I'd read all their work in the public library. And I wanted them there so I could quiz them about where's the science. I saw Dr. Neufeld in the bar at the hotel. And I went up to her and asked her about enzyme replacement therapy and the possibility for MPS I and our conversation with Dr. Brady. She said it's not only possible, but there's a scientist working behind a county hospital near LA. It's working on a former student of hers. He has no funds and he soon will close unless he can get some funds. But she said, if anybody can do it, he can do it. His name is Emil Kakis. So let's get the video. So now we had hope. We had the potential of having a treatment in time for Ryan to actually stay in the game. By this time he had stopped playing baseball. He couldn't hold the bat anymore. He stopped playing soccer. His last game he had collapsed because he had a hernia at the moment, which was one of his many surgeries that would be coming. But I reached out to Dr. Emil Kakis the very day we heard his name. And this is where we found him. in a World War II era, literally a World War II era Quonset hut behind a county hospital in Torrance, California. In this little wooden structure, Dr. Kakis would change the world and ignite what we look back now and see as the golden age of rare disease. Started with a treatment for MPS I. Dr. Kakis hired a biologist named Mary Passage with the funds that we raised and sent out to LA. And I asked her once, not long after the trial started, what was it like when Dr. Kakis first brought you in? And she said, well, in that little blue building, I walked in and it was empty. There was one older Italian gentleman that only spoke Italian, and he was building shelves in the corner. And Dr. Kakis and I, for the first week and a half, 2 weeks, we scrubbed the walls and built shelves. And from that structure and that mind and that incredible scientist came what would be a treatment for MPS I. This little instrument here, actually, he said if we had $200,000, we could buy this little reactor, which would make enough enzyme that we could perhaps go to the FDA and start a trial. He did it with that little reactor in that little building. But he brought in a handful of employees, and soon they would start. On April 13th, 1988, Ryan was born. We told him he probably wouldn't live past 10 or 15. On February 13th, 1998, 8 weeks before his 10th birthday, Dr. Kakis and Jean and I pushed the button, and all 10 children in the first trial actually improved dramatically. But we know now that enzyme replacement therapy is not a cure, it's not a treatment. It partners with bone marrow and stem cell transplant to help buy what we need most of all, is time. As the host of 60 Minutes said, I thought you said it very well. These children now have something precious, time to await a cure and plan for a future that many thought would never come. I think the message that we personally get out of the great science that came out of that wooden World War II era structure was, there is hope in science, but there's also hope in effort, and hope, as Rob said, in collaboration. When we lean on each other, we don't fall down. We can help each other up. We can help each other forward through the gift of each other. We needed help in the trial. Dr. Kakis is the one who built it. He needed help to build a potential treatment, and he found those in other scientists. But Dr. Kakis and the Ryan Foundation and grants could not bring that enzyme replacement therapy through the incredibly expensive process of approval of a drug. It would take, by the end, close to $50 million. We weren't going to be able to raise that with a bake sale. So a company formed to try to launch this therapy called BioMarin. We've all heard of BioMarin now because it's really done quite well. But BioMarin came in and treated those 10 children, and those 10 children improved. And when they went to the FDA, and the first reviewer said, yes, put your data together, bring it forward, it's very powerful. It looks very good. And so they did, they brought it forward. Here's the backstory. That first investigator from the FDA passed away. And so they had to bring it to another investigator with the FDA. And they said, you can't run a trial. You get an approval of 10 patients, you need more. So that would have bankrupted BioMarin. They would have gone away, and that would have been the end of the story, and no approval for MPS I. BioMarin then partnered with a company called Genzyme. And a 50-50 profit share, they brought it to a second trial with sites in LA, in New York, in Germany, in UK, and in Vancouver. And in May of 2003, enzyme replacement therapy for MPS I was approved. Good news was BioMarin then launched further and brought us treatments for MPS IV and MPS VI. Shire Takeda came in and brought us then forward treatment for MPS II, and now Ultragenyx for MPS VII. All of this came because of partnerships. We'll skip that one. So much better with the graphics, but this gives you an idea of what happened from the time it was approved in the US and Canada, where it went after that. 75 countries worldwide. Now, when a child is diagnosed with MPS I, has the opportunity to start ERT, then move forward with transplant and wait for what we say is most important. It's the gift of time. Ryan has done well. He actually struggled academically and cognitively, was in another trial at UCLA where he receives ERT through intrathecal process. It works well for him. It didn't work quite well for all the patients, so it really hasn't been approved. But it got him back in college. He graduated from an ACC school like Rob Syracuse. He graduated from the University of Louisville a couple of years ago. He got a job at the hospital that diagnosed him at UT Southwestern in Dallas. And the big news, that was Dr. Kakis at his graduation at the University of Louisville. And the big news now is that on Derby Day, 2019, Ryan asked his longtime girlfriend, Sylvia, a third grade bilingual teacher in Dallas area, to marry him. And so this July 3rd, we're all going to Dallas and watch the dream that never would happen, the dream that was taken away without any hope for tomorrow, of Ryan walking down the aisle and getting married. We've been very lucky. Ryan still has the disease, obviously. He's still waiting for a better treatment. He's had 14 surgeries along the way. And there are more to come. He limps quite a bit when he walks now, and he still has some other issues. But the gift of science and the gift of families relying on each other and bringing hope to each other when we all need it really changed our life and changed the lives of those families around the world. I think our message today from us, Ryan and his parents, myself, is that there is hope in togetherness, and there is hope in effort. And that's why I was so moved by Rob and Caroline's story, and that we truly are on the same journey. So I want to thank you both for sharing. And thank you, Kim, and the team at the Canadian MPS Society for asking me to share our story again. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. That was another awesome story, and I love the happy ending there with Ryan and his engagement. I just wanted to take this time to thank all three panelists. And
I'm not hearing anyone, so can someone help me through this?
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me, Mark? Mark?
Shoot. I'll try to figure it out for you, Mark. I'm not sure why.
But yeah, so I guess Mark can't hear me, but Rob and Caroline who can, thank you so much. And thank you to our participants that came today. We hope to have this recording and be able to share it to those that couldn't make it, but please email us whenever you guys feel like you need a shoulder to lean on, or if you find that we can help you in any way possible, we'd love that.
Okay, so I see I am the host now, and I should not be the host. So how does one fix that?
It's okay.
I can't hear you, Kim. This is bad news to the home team here.
Oh dear. Okay, I'm just gonna.
I can hear no one.
Okay.
Not sure if you can hear me or not.
Okay, one moment.
How about I jump out? Is that possible?
Yeah.
Somebody shake a head, and then I'll jump back on.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. Okay.
But I think
that's I'm gonna leave meeting.
Oh wait.
A Q&A session for anyone that had any questions. Can anyone hear me? Yeah. Okay.
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Did anyone have any questions that they wanted to ask either Rob or Carolyn or Kim, myself? You can drop it in the chat box or the Q&A box. And we'll wait around for a second to see if any come in. Welcome back, Mark. Can you hear anything now?
Mark, can you hear anything? Okay. You have to love technology when it works. Okay, I don't see any questions coming in. I want to thank everybody for attending, but especially a big thank you to our panelists for your bravery, for your inspiration. I look forward to being able to share this presentation with a lot more of our members and network. Very proud of this today. And thank you, Alex, for your help in facilitating this meeting. And we look forward to connecting with you again in the near future. And if anybody has any questions that they want to ask after this, we shut the webinar down, please email to info@MPS Society, and we'll make sure the questions get to the correct individuals. Okay, Mark, are you able to hear us now? Nope, still nothing. Okay, so again, as Alex says, without further ado, I'll
I'm back.
Oh, good, yay. Okay.
Sorry about that.
So Mark, I was just stating, if anybody has any questions beyond this webinar, they can email info@MPS Society, and we'll have a link to this webinar up on our social media website and on our YouTube channel, and also the link to the 60 Minutes segment, if you wouldn't mind sending that. And I just want to end this to say one thing. Mark Dant is one of my favorite human beings on this planet, and it's just very nice to see you again, Mark. And then Rob and Carolyn Marie, thank you so much. You're beautiful humans and inspiring. Okay, so we can all sign off now. Thanks so much, and wish
Bye.
everyone a great rest of the day.
Thanks, guys.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye-bye.